The sun was setting over the city, painting the skyline in bruised shades of orange and purple. A cool wind swept through the streets, carrying the distant hum of traffic and the faint scent of rain. In a high-rise office overlooking it all sat Ezekiel, a young man who had everything, or at least, that's what he thought. Ezekiel was brilliant, ambitious, unstoppable, or so everyone said. Promotions came easily to him, friends admired his confidence, and people often said he had the perfect combination of intelligence and charm. But pride ran through his veins like fire. He believed he could control everything, predict every outcome, and handle every situation flawlessly. Mistakes, weakness, humility, he never allowed them near him. That evening, he stood before the glass window, sipping a drink he didn't even taste, scrolling through the latest headlines on his phone. Another project delivered flawlessly, he muttered to himself. Of course. Nobody works like I do. A knock on the door broke the quiet. His assistant, Mariah, stepped in hesitantly. Ezekiel, there's something you should see. It's about the Henderson deal. He didn't even look up. The Henderson deal is perfect. There's nothing to see. Mariah's voice wavered. It's complicated. I think we should talk before it escalates. Ezekiel turned, finally meeting her gaze. There was a hint of worry in her eyes, a depth of concern he had learned to ignore. Complicated, he scoffed. Everything I touch turns to gold. Show me the numbers. She handed him a folder. His sharp eyes skimmed through graphs, projections, emails. At first, he didn't understand. Then it hit him like a punch to the gut. Numbers didn't lie. The deal wasn't perfect. It was failing badly. And it was his pride, his arrogance, that had blinded him to warnings everyone else had seen. You ignored the emails? He asked, voice tight. I tried to reach you, Mariah whispered. You didn't want to hear it. Ezekiel stared at the paper, the room spinning. Pride, that same fire that had carried him to the top, had become a cage. He had believed he was untouchable. He hadn't seen the cracks forming beneath him. That night, Ezekiel couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision, every arrogant word, every moment he had brushed aside advice, thinking he knew better. The city lights shimmered below his window like tiny taunts. Days passed and the deal collapsed. Investors pulled out. Partners turned their backs. Colleagues whispered. Some avoided him. Ezekiel's reputation, a fortress he had spent years building, cracked overnight. He tried to fix it. He tried to explain, to persuade, to prove himself. But the harder he fought, the worse it became. Every argument, every justification, every attempt to reclaim control only reminded people of his mistakes. His pride had cost him more than he could imagine. One evening, as he wandered through the empty streets, Ezekiel found himself standing before an old bookstore tucked between high-rise buildings. A sign in faded gold read, Stories of Life, Lessons of the Heart. He stepped inside, the smell of old paper and dust curling around him like a quiet embrace. A small bell rang. An elderly man appeared from behind a counter. Can I help you? Ezekiel shook his head, words caught in his throat. Then he said, I need to understand something. I need to learn why I failed. The man nodded slowly. Pride, he said. It's the costliest currency you'll ever spend. But it's also a teacher. Sit. Read. Ezekiel wandered the aisles, picking up worn journals, stories of people who had been blinded by their own self-importance. Stories of fortune lost, relationships shattered, opportunities wasted. He read about a young man who ignored advice and lost a business, a woman who refused to apologize and lost her closest friend, a student who never listened and failed despite talent. Each story echoed his own life, a mirror of mistakes he had refused to acknowledge. Hours passed. Night deepened. Ezekiel closed the last journal and looked around. The weight of humility pressed on him. For the first time, he admitted it, not to anyone else, not even to Mariah, but to himself. He had been arrogant, careless, and blind. Pride had promised him power, but had delivered isolation. The next day, he returned to his office. He called Mariah first. I need your help, he said quietly. Every piece of advice you have, I will listen. No excuses, no interruptions. Over the following weeks, Ezekiel worked differently. He asked questions. He listened. He admitted mistakes. He apologized. He learned. Slowly, trust returned. Colleagues began to approach him, not out of fear or admiration, but out of respect. Investors returned. The Henderson deal, though damaged, was salvaged, rebuilt stronger than before. Ezekiel still had pride, but it no longer ruled him. It had become a tool, tempered by humility. He had learned the hard way that pride could elevate, yes, but it could also destroy. The price was steep, but the lesson was priceless. Years later, Ezekiel stood in the same high-rise office, looking out over the city again. He held a small notebook, filled with lessons he had learned from failure, from pride, from life itself. A young intern walked in nervously, holding a folder. Ezekiel smiled. "Come in," he said warmly. "Let's go over this together. I want to hear everything you have to say." The intern blinked, surprised by the patience in his tone. Ezekiel thought of himself, years ago, blinded by arrogance, deaf to advice, untouchable in his own mind. He had paid the price. He had learned. And now, he would help others avoid the same trap. Because the greatest lesson Ezekiel had ever learned was simple. Pride can lift you, or it can break you. The difference is knowing when to listen, when to step back, and when to humble yourself. And for the first time in his life, Ezekiel felt free.